something close to 2/3 to 75% of transformations fail. Oh my God, if we succeed, that's like a miracle.
The faster you can get to the doing as opposed to the planning, the better chance you're going to have of succeeding.
Resilience, adaptability, responsiveness, qualities that every single business executive will say they want and want more of, tragically looks precisely like waste right up until the moment it's needed.
Vision that's broad enough to be compelling and inclusive and allow for a margin for experimentation, but tactical enough to execute.
I know for a fact that the Ford Motor Company had every right, as did GM, to enter the space that Tesla now occupies. They just didn't have the courage to go there.
Sometimes psychological safety can be weaponized, and it can be used as a way to say, I don't feel safe, so I don't want to move forward in something or take this risk.
Vulnerability at value. Vulnerability is absolutely overvalued.
The best leaders, they know that safety does not equal comfort. And they're okay creating discomfort.
Hello and welcome to our first Breakthrough Innovation panel on culture and courage and innovation. I'm JL Heather. With me is Preston Chandler. We're the founders of Centered and today's hosts. Today, we're going to dive deep into how leadership behavior, psychological safety, and authentic courage shape innovation within organizations. And we have an exceptional group of leaders with us who bring a diverse set of experiences and powerful insights. First off, we have Jason Gaikowski, the Chief Transformation Officer at VML, pushing boundaries with his unique perspective on vulnerability, followed by Jennifer Moore, the Chief Product Officer at Strategies That Spark, and a seasoned product executive known for navigating teams through complexity towards clarity. And then last but certainly not least, we have Jason Grimm, a tech leader at SpectroCloud, who has a rich history in innovation, servant leadership, and groundbreaking technology transformations. I want to thank you all for being here and sharing your experience and insights.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, JL.
It's great to be here.
And Preston.
Awesome. So we've got a few themes to go through. We're going to be hitting on, how leadership shapes culture and innovation, that critical role of psychological safety, and then the authentic courage that drives meaningful innovation. But to start off, theme one, we're going to dive in to leadership and culture. And Jennifer, I think we'll pass the first question to you. How do you intentionally shape a culture that genuinely supports innovation?
I define culture by how we think and act to get things done. So when I think about innovation, that has to be kind of core to the activities basically that you want your team to be pursuing. You want them to be doing things that are new and different. And the only way I think to really provide that type of culture is to create the canvas for them to work within, where it's okay to experiment and fail, and it's okay to ask hard questions and to think differently. And we can use that as company taglines, of course, and we can have the values on our walls. But what it really comes down to is the top-down leadership modeling that and being okay with and openly acknowledging when there are failures and celebrating those.
Totally agreed. I think that celebrating failure can be so hard. We have such a tendency to try to punish failure. So maybe a follow-on question is, how have you seen celebrating failure work? Are there any examples that you can share with us?
I think it's just a matter of, let's talk about what didn't work and having an open dialogue. So if you've created a foundation of psychological safety within your teams and within your company, again, modeling the behavior in the top down, it's showing up at a town hall as an executive and saying, hey, we tried this thing and it did not go well. And here's why. So I'll give you an example. I had a product launch that I was leading, and we were expecting maybe 10,000 of our users to adopt in the first week or so. And we had run alpha testing, we had done beta testing, we had done a lot of marketing around it, and we launched and it was crickets. Like no one was adopting this feature. And we were so excited about it and we'd made a big deal about it. And we realized it was just it was a discoverability issue, but it was also maybe going back to a lack of deeper research with our users to understand what they really needed. And they were like, this is great, but what we really wanted with this, and we just kind of missed the boat. And so when you have something like that that's so visible, the celebration is you need to talk about it. You need to say, hey, we tried something, it didn't work, and here's what we learned. I think having a mentality of there is no failure in a lot of ways because you either win or you learn. Either way,
Mhm.
you win. And so you're needing to talk about those learnings and invite the rest of the team or the company to be a part of that. Don't just sit in the corner and be like, "Oh, I hope no one notices that I really messed that up." And it's okay as a leader to admit to that and to make it an important part of those conversations with the company, or maybe it's just in a department. But I think setting aside the time to talk about the failures is a way of celebrating them. Like, you don't have to be like, woohoo, we failed. But it's more about like, okay, let's actually sit and do this postmortem. It's painful, but we learned and we're going to do better next time.
And I do love a good Nelson Mandela quote that I never lose, I either win or learn. But I'm curious, the Jasons on the panel, if you all have something to add.
Well, I agree with a lot of what Jennifer said. Personally, I get a little bit suspicious of platitudes of any way, shape, or form. I believe quite deeply in the power of leaders modeling the way. And so I think then becomes incumbent upon a leader, and certainly myself, I will be the first to put myself in a situation where a blunder is all but guaranteed, right? Because if I can be seen by the team as sort of blundering my way through it, like experimenting and tripping and almost in a Dick Van Dykean kind of method, making my way forward no matter how many times I fall off a ladder, then that creates a kind of culture where blundering your way forward is the norm, right? Without any particular rallying cries. When it comes to mistake making and learning, I kind of pursue a bit of a middle way, right? Like, the data is quite clear. Something close to 2/3 to 75% of transformations fail. Oh my God, if we succeed, that's like a miracle.
Mm.
Like, oh, it didn't go perfectly? Shocking, right? Like, I don't need to condemn it. I don't need to like artificially inflate it. I just need to acknowledge and accept it that that's just an inevitable part of the painful, painful business of innovation and change.
Yeah, I'd have a part of a comment and a question, I guess. So at Cisco for 5 years in this cloud business group, and Cisco's a great company. I enjoyed my time there, but in the tech market, I mean, people say it's where great startups go to die, right? Which is too bad, right? Because they acquire it. There's really a lot of great things there, but in the 5 years in this cloud business group, I saw a dozen at least major acquisitions, and maybe three of them survived. And I think there's a disconnect between the art of the possible and the visionaries and doing the research and looking at the products and data and services and saying, this can really work. We can make this. And then, you have the typical startup culture and coming into a large global tech culture. And it's just, I wonder if there's a disconnect between finance or operations or kind of the meat and potatoes of the business in terms of, what looks good on the books versus, what it takes to actually integrate this very innovative product, which takes work, right? Because you're taking a 5 or 7 or 8 year old company with a lot of innovative ideas and bringing it into like 20, 30 or 40-year-old companies. I guess the question is in there, and it's a big question. I don't know how we can solve it, but like Jennifer or Gaikowski, like, I haven't been able to bridge that gap between the people that write the checks and and the people that have the vision, right? So I don't know if you've got some experience there.
I've got so many thoughts on that topic, Jason. I think one of the important ones, and I'm going to quote the economist Tim Horford, who observed that resilience, adaptability, responsiveness, qualities that every single business executive will say they want and want more of, tragically looks precisely like waste right up until the moment that it's needed.
but it's not.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there's this natural instinct towards optimization and capital efficiency, especially in large organizations, that just overshadows the degree of uncertainty, risk, ambiguity, creativity that is a necessary ingredient of innovation, invention, and change. Right. And I literally use the language of economics in order to help finance and accounting minded executives recognize that if they are underinvesting in ambiguity, they are literally hastening the organization's demise.
There's an element of that. You can either transform while you're strong or you can do it under pressure, but you really don't have an option other than that. Awesome. I love the discussion. And I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about this, but what are the specific behaviors that are going to promote that true innovation from leaders, not only like direct leaders, but to your point, Jason Grimm, like the financial leaders, the operational leaders? What are some of those behaviors that you would look for that helps drive that conversation or that culture?
Well, the behaviors would be an entrepreneurial spirit and a tolerance for risk and a vision that's broad enough to be compelling and inclusive and allow for a margin for experimentation, but tactical enough to execute on that, right? So when these orgs come in and these new products and services come in, this idea that they're just going to fit neatly into this other vertical of or portfolio of products and services is not, is rarely the case, because they've made a beachhead in the market because they have something innovative and unique. And then I think the temptation to just take this new service and say, now it's a part of this other suite of other stuff, right? That may, the other end is to have something so unique, like the AppD acquisition was one of the very large ones that and it was outside of anything that was at the org at the time that looked or smelt kind of like that. So I think I think the answer there is to just be very cautious and know the audience, know your tech. And I know they're doing the research. I don't really understand why there's the square peg in the round hole conundrum that it comes into. I don't. But to answer your question, the leaders and finance and operations, I think breaking down the silos of the strategy, because you get to an organization with that kind of scale and everyone has their metrics to make, and everyone has their own little fiefdom and walled garden to protect. And I think those stakes get higher and higher as the org grows and the folks at the top and there's less visibilities. I think there's a way to flatten that out, really. And it's not just getting ELT from 6 orgs in a room to kind of hash it out. I think they need to be more inclusive, bring in bring in product and bring in support. I mean, people forget about day 2, you know what I mean? And it's like, there's this really, and it's like, I think those leaders have to be very strategic about being more inclusive for the folks that are actually developing, that are actually delivering, that are actually supporting, that are bring marketing, bring everybody. Well, not everybody, that'd be hundreds of people, but create
A representative sample.
The Tiger team, right? The Tiger team can't stop at the VP and senior director level. I think would be a good step forward.
I think I heard one other one in there, Jason, and correct me if you see it different, but I thought that you were framing it from the perspective of all too often we start framing the future in the context of today. And if we do that too much, then we'll just get more of today. And that somehow, I don't know the right way to do it, but it sounded like you were saying that sometimes those leaders have to allow themselves to step away from the current realities.
Yes.
They can't put the blinders on just all the things that happen today.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I mean, there's limits to that. I mean, Ford is probably not going to make airplanes, right? But but they are vehicles. They have engines, right? Not that they couldn't, but they, some things, I guess, understand the latitude that you have in the market there. But yeah, I think there's a confirmation bias, right? Especially when you've been at an org 10, 20 years and there's a lot of on the old day, like there's a lot of remember wins, but that's not here anymore. And I think it's, pretty easy to get complacent and comfortable and the devil, or the products, and kind of get into those ruts. Have a good idea on paper to bring in some innovative tech, but then you're bringing your 20-year-old operating model or adoption model to the table on brand new tech and brand new ideas. And I think that's why a lot of these fail.
Yeah,
I don't have the data at the top of my head, but
it's there.
it's north of 50%, I think, across the board. It certainly was in the orgs I was in.
Jennifer, Jason, Gaikowski, anything to add before we move on to the next theme?
I think the most important trait that a leader can have to drive innovation is decisiveness. And I think we've mentioned it before, right? It's decisiveness in the face of ambiguity. And the faster you can get to a decision and start actually moving, and it's the build, measure, learn mentality from a product perspective, but the faster you can get to the doing as opposed to the planning, the better chance you're going to have of succeeding, right? Innovation in general has a very high failure rate. And I think I had a leader at one point, one of his favorite phrases is kind of crass, but one of his favorite phrases was, we need to have intestinal fortitude. Like, do we have the intestinal fortitude to, take this risk? And it's a little graphic, but I think about some of the best leaders that I've worked with, and the way I try to model that in terms of just the decisiveness of, hey, we might be wrong, but we're not confused. Like that's the way I like to think about it, because it's like we have a direction. We're going after this big opportunity, and this is where we're placing our bets, not creating confusion by indecisiveness. I think that's one of the fatal flaws, especially of a product leader, but also at the executive level, and like with the executive team or the CEO or founder. So intestinal fortitude.
I love it.
100%, Jennifer. I totally agree. I think that's just called guts, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the same thing.
Courage.
But yes, courage.
I was going to
I
say,
mean, 100% on
directly into my work on courage.
right.
The thing is hard. It might not work, and you do it anyway. Right. And I find that analogies and storytelling is incredibly important, both of opportunities gained and opportunities lost. Right. Like you may remember a number of years ago, Listerine breath strips, 15 years ago, created an enormous business. I know for an absolute fact that a different company developed that technology first and just didn't have the courage to take it to market.
Mm.
Right? I know for a fact that the Ford Motor Company had every right, as did GM, to enter the space that Tesla now occupies. They just didn't have the courage to go there. Right? And I think that stories become really important to helping executives understand what they have to gain and to lose from displaying or not displaying appropriate courage.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think courage is kind of built on top of psychological safety and trust, which kind of leads into that next question, which Jason Gaikowski, we'll send this one to you. How do you cultivate psychological safety in teams, especially when we're talking about these really high stakes, innovative projects?
I draw an awful lot of wisdom that is ancient wisdom, as well as just mathematical reality, right? Like, do the thing. You're going to die. It kind of doesn't matter. Like, I don't like there's a bit of nihilism, but there's something really, really powerful. And I have some natural advantages as a neurodiverse mind. I have some natural advantages in that I tend not to see the world filtered through a layer of social meaning. Right? I just have an easier time seeing the world as it is. And so part of my responsibility as a leader is to help others see the world as it actually is, not as it might be supposed to be. Right? Like the likelihood, just from a pure mathematical standpoint, like the likelihood is that the worst case scenario is survivable is exceptionally high. The likelihood the worst case scenario actually happens is vanishingly remote. And then the third question that I utterly adore is, and could you imagine that there is anyone anywhere throughout time or history dumber than you that has figured this out? Right? And like, if you can go through the process of what's the worst case scenario, not that bad. What's the likelihood of the worst case scenario actually happening? Almost none. Anybody dumber than you that has figured this out? Probably. Right? Like I asked an engineering team a number of years ago if they thought we could tackle a particular challenge. And they're like, oh my God, no. And I said, okay, if you had like 10 years and $100 million, could you tackle this challenge? They're like, oh my God, yes, we could do it in 18 months. And I'm like, outstanding. Let's move forward, please. Right? There's
I love
just
it.
something important about seeing the world as it actually is that creates safety and cultivates courage.
I
Jennifer,
also yeah, I really love that, and I also think that sometimes psychological safety can be weaponized, and it can be used as a way to say, "I don't feel safe, so I don't wanna move forward in something or take this risk." But I think that the best leaders, they know that safety does not equal comfort, and they're okay creating discomfort, right?
Mm.
And we're all just honestly, we are too damn comfortable. Like just as a society, as leaders, as a company, as companies, we're taught that we need to build in this security for our people and they need to be happy and they need to feel good all the time. And the reality is, you know, like kind of the nihilistic side of it where it's like we're all going to die. But like at the same time, we have to live in discomfort in order to grow, in order to change things and make progress. And I think because of how comfortable everything else is in our lives, we sometimes accept that safety equals comfort and it doesn't. So I think if we can embrace that discomfort, that's one step towards creating real psychological safety that doesn't hopefully get weaponized.
That's great.
Jason Grimm, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I love the elements of story that we're talking about and bringing that into psychological safety and love the safety doesn't equal comfort, and I am fascinated by storytelling and it's not lost. I mean, I think about this often when I am in that position where I'm struggling with something and that being grateful for the struggle, like our best stories, our best, effectively all of our movies, books, plays, film, all of our art, not all of it. The vast majority of our art is the hero's journey, right? And that is fraught with, parts 4 and 5, which is, the struggle, the pivoting point. Um, I do believe the psychological, the safety can be weaponized. I like that term and used as an excuse to not show up, to not experiment, to not take risks, to not. I mean, it can be truly a momentum and kind of progress and innovation killing excuse to do that and to thread the needle where you can create safety and make it clear that that doesn't equal comfort and that this is one story, part of a much larger meta story. Your life, this org, this team, what we're building, like it's you're going to look back on this in 5 years and if you lean in and see that you've built something cool or you've met some really cool people or like you've changed something, that the culture in the org, you've brought some new cool thing to market or you've helped people, and it's like I think it's great to be in the moment and be present and like focus on what you have to do, but then kind of zoom out, right? When I run teams, I encourage them to zoom out and away from the thing that's right in front of our face right now, causing us pain or anxiety. And I think weaving that element of story into that is helpful and encouraging people, you can be safe and uncomfortable. I love that, what Jennifer brought up there.
And I'm kind of seeing this concept of non-productive discomfort and productive discomfort. And psychological safety is about removing that non-productive discomfort, the stuff that we just don't need involved, so we can really focus on that productive discomfort and move forward. I'm curious, and maybe we'll go back to Jennifer for this one. Do you have any specific examples of where safety has helped made that distinction and really enhanced that innovation outcome?
Yes. So when I joined ed tech company, they were about 350 million and they were doing a take private. And the first week I joined was when they made that announcement and everyone was in turmoil. The overall, and it was 2020, so it was like the pandemic and George Floyd, there was a lot going on from a macro perspective. So lots of empathy there, of course, but when I first joined, I spent the entire first week I was a VP and I spent my entire first week just kind of framing for everyone, guys, there's always a bigger fish and mapping for them. To your point, Jason, I had this little slide that I had put together that was like my career and I started here and then this bigger fish came and this is what happened and just showing the pattern of innovation that can happen and what good things come of I mean, obviously take privates are a little bit traumatic, but the goal was just to paint that picture, to your point, telling the story. Like, I have been through this 5 times where we're a little fish and there's a bigger fish that comes along, and this is what happened. This is the growth that we experienced. This is the innovation that could take hold, and it's going to be okay. And you're all going to survive, because there was such, again, just like unproductive discomfort. I actually really love that spectrum that you just pointed out, painted that picture of everyone was so swirling about, what is this going to mean for me? And, oh my gosh, so much change. And what if they do this? And what if they take away this benefit? And if you didn't want to be in that change and that moment of potential innovation, that launch pad, you can absolutely opt out. And that's okay, right? From the people perspective, you need to, as a leader, you need to be very clear. It's okay to opt out of this next phase of innovation and not sign up for this. And so that's hard, but it requires a strong inner foundation to do that. And you have to make that decision for yourself. But at the company level, you have to be able to accept that innovation is going to require the pain for that short-term pain for a long-term gain.
I had a kind of a follow-up comment on the psychological safety and trust, and the I think know your audience is what came to mind, or know your team. I'm someone that has had my own startups. I lean in, early adopter of cloud, like always leaning in and experimenting, right? And there's someone I've known who's like my brother since 5th grade, and he'll spend 20 years at an org doing ops. He's in IT, but like, psychologically, some folks aren't comfortable with that velocity that we've created. Like, I mean, humans, generally speaking, it used to be 12 of us sitting around a campfire, like just trying to find something to eat, and that was pretty easy, not easy, but like simple, right? And you go and you hunt, you eat, you rest, right? Now, and to Jennifer's earlier point about the velocity, I was thinking about the 2-week sprints, right? We used to release software twice a year at best, right? You might get a dot release in the middle of the year, and so we've got 12 months to get out the next release, and it's like, no, we're releasing in 2 weeks, and 2 weeks and 2 weeks and 2 weeks. And I think I've made mistakes as a leader, and I've also made mistakes as a team member, going into teams that were not moving fast enough, not pushing fast enough to keep me engaged and excited, and then also bringing in members of the team that I've had an appetite or thought could keep up with that velocity. And psychologically, it's not, it's a very much a square peg in a round hole. And it's like, arguably I've put myself in situations that are moving even too fast for me. So it's like, know your audience, even though the audience is also me, and then and setting realistic expectations about the team and meeting them where they're at, and even career growth, and like, if they want to move that direction, or if there's a better role. And it's like, I think if we can find the right role and the right mentorship, people will thrive, if we have that trust and that transparency and that authenticity, and not, just be very open about what they want to do, and not force churn. It's not good for the leader. It's not good for the team. It's not good for the org. Right.
Yeah. Help people understand what getting on the bus means. Yeah. And then help them find the right bus. I like that a lot.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, I kind of want to move into a new topic, and I think this one's going to be fun because I think it's a little bit controversial at times. And Jason, I'm going to start off with you as we kind of dig into the difference between authentic and performative vulnerability. And you've mentioned a lot about how vulnerability can be overemphasized, and I love some of the articles you've written on that recently. So I'm curious, can you elaborate or maybe distinguish what you mean by authentic vulnerability versus those maybe performative gestures?
Well, I mean, let's just get the controversial headline out of the way, shall we? Vulnerability
Absolutely.
at value. Vulnerability is absolutely overvalued, right? Is overvalued. It is performative. I don't know if it's weaponized, but weaponizing psychological safety. I love that, what Jennifer said. And frankly, the more I study vulnerability, especially next to courage, the more I'm out on vulnerability. Like, I'm out. And the kind of thing that gets my attention, this notion of performative vulnerability. If you ever hear the words, "this is a safe space," that is a very reliable indicator that you have now in a zone of performative vulnerability. When when I see or hear things like vulnerability is my superpower or vulnerability is your superpower, I'm like, no, I'm out. Like, if that were true, then the most vulnerable would be the most powerful. And that's not true, right? High degrees of vulnerability are associated with high degrees of dependence, right? Think infants, think the infirm, think the elderly, right? And what I can observe in the world is there is a kind of public display of vulnerability because it is the popular thing and it is the common thing and it has become the expected thing, which is rather different than having the courage in a key moment to share authentically a fear, a weakness, an uncertainty, a limitation, but having the discernment to know when, where, and how to practice that authentic vulnerability. I find that gathering up a team that you have to lead through innovation or change and talking about how it's scary and may not feel good, wildly unproductive, right? But while offering courage to that team, helping them find within themselves their own psychological safety such that they are not dependent on me as a leader, but their safety is built on an internal foundation. But then knowing, like in key moments, like, JL, I am terrible at this. Like, I absolutely blundered in a similar situation. Like, as a means of bolstering your courage and confidence, like, that's where authentic vulnerability becomes an essential ingredient in what I feel is a courageous way of leading, right? Performative ability, like showmanship for the sake of showmanship, like, I'm out. I think it's dangerous. I think it's damaging. I think it's manipulative.
I think some of that harkens back to something that Jennifer had said earlier about the way you look at failure. So maybe Jennifer, I'd like you to maybe talk a little bit about that vulnerability when it comes to how do we look at failure and is it vulnerable or is it courageous?
I'll be quite honest. I am not, I just don't know that I've really gone to the depths with that concept of vulnerability as much as you have, Jason. And so I think as you're talking, my wheels are turning like so fast and I'm getting chill. I got chills when you were talking because I'm like, I say this is a safe space all the time, but I'm usually using it in an ironic way, like safe
Right?
space, right? Like it's kind of like a haha safe space, like everyone just kind of share the truth, right? And so I think courage to be honest and direct with what's real and
Mhm.
not live in maybe some fantasy world that we're trying to develop for ourselves where we feel safe and warm and happy all the time. I think maybe that's where I would draw those connection points because I do see the point, Jason, of what you were saying, where I think sometimes vulnerability and authenticity get confused because
Totally.
the truly vulnerable populations in the world are highly dependent, they're powerless, they're in actual real danger. And for me to show up as a leader and own a failure and say, I did this wrong. I think part of it is just based on your intention. Are you making it about yourself in the moment? Like I'm processing something and woe is me? Or is it about the learnings and insights that you can use to fuel momentum for innovation? And so I think for me, I'm literally like processing all this in the moment, but I love that concept. I do a lot of keynote speaking and I had a coach at one point tell me when you're on stage, your your goal is never to process what you've been through and visit that upon the audience. Like that's selfish. That's not productive, right? You want to take what you've learned and just be very clear about I went through this hard thing, but you're not going to like dwell on it and be performatively vulnerable. I really love that, Jason. You're not performing. It's like, hey, I did this hard thing and here's what I learned and you can hopefully gain something from this too, right? And I think for leaders, we're trying to instill that level of confidence in our teams by showing them that hey, I failed at this and I'm okay. Look where I am. Look what I've done. Like I've been successful overall. It's okay to fail and I can be authentic in a moment about owning that and still being confident that we can go forward as a team or as a company and succeed where maybe I failed previously or we hear stories of failures previously and we're going to learn and try to do something different. I Yeah, like I said, I'm just connecting a bunch of dots in my head right now. So,
Yeah, I love
yes.
that, Jennifer. In
Yeah.
my writing, one of the things that I identify is ultimately, if we're honest, vulnerability is a privilege granted to those who are already successful, who are already powerful, right? A young professional showing up on their first day of work, do you want them leading with vulnerability or do you want them coming in with courage? And if you're going to help them succeed in their career and ultimately in their profession, are you there to bolster their vulnerability or are you there to bolster their courage?
Right.
And I think your comment that I think that we confuse authenticity and vulnerability is spot on. I think we also confuse vulnerability with kindness, with consideration, with compassion, right? Which I see as incredible ingredients that go wonderfully along with courage. And vulnerability, it's a fact of life, it's a fact of existence, it's a fact of reality. And maybe it can be used in small doses, but reluctantly and authentically only.
It
Yeah.
reminds me of um that post at one point that was popular in 2022 when that happened where the crying CEO, right? Like,
Crying
oh
CEO,
my God.
crying Jordan.
Yeah, like you're coming out with millions of like a big package with like millions of dollars and all these people like lost their livelihood and you're crying about it. It's like, dude, like get a grip. And that's performative, right? It's like no one
Totally.
wants to see that and no one cares and you're making it about yourself. You're being selfish.
Jason Grimm, do we have a dissenting opinion?
It's a very interesting topic and a very interesting conversation, and I love the commentary. It was yeah, and I think I was looking at myself. I'm probably someone who leans in too much into some of these domains, and it was like I was considering these things about myself. But I think there's a nuanced or a Venn diagram between courage and vulnerability and authenticity, right? And there's some interdependency on that, and there's like it's difficult to draw a hard line. Sometimes it's very easy, right? If I'm angry and yelling at you, and you're like, hold on, and it's like I'm being my authentic self here, and it's like it's like I'm authentically angry, and now I get to yell at you, and it's like no, that's not exactly it, So it's a nuance, and then like we say the word authentic, but like we're judging someone else's words and making a call on whatever they're saying is authentic or not, right? Because and we're using our own mirror into ourselves, right? And yes, you get to sniff that out. You get better and better at sniffing that out. But yeah, it's an extremely, kind of unnerving and real conversation to have about that. I completely agree about the performative stuff, and no one wants to see that. But then to be, you don't get vulnerability without courage. There's an overlap there, right? And authenticity, I think we can detect more than others. So I'm still kind of processing everything, but the weaponizing social media, like we're all looking at each other everywhere all the time, all at once, and it's like we are performing. Well, like and generally speaking, right? And it's a bit annoying. And the safe space is a weaponized, overloaded term as well. Safe according to who? Safe according to what? There's a fire alarm, like how safe do you want to be? And it's like, so it's so subjective, right? And it is a first world problem, like we've gotten very soft, I think some of the best and worst things that I've done early in my career was deployed in second and third worlds, and it's like, when we were kids, it's like, there's people starving in Ethiopia. And I'm there's people, you know what I mean? Like there's people with really intense problems and, not getting, my performance review didn't get them, it's like, let's check. And here's another check your privilege, right? And that's weaponized, it's like, we're so fueled up, psychologically, we're not used to living so much intense communication all the time, right? And we don't really know how to handle it. So I don't have anything really constructive. I'm intrigued with the conversation and checking my own concepts on it. So I appreciate that.
Oh, that's great. I know we're hitting about the 45-minute mark, so we might start wrapping up here a little bit. Maybe a good way to wrap up is to do a round robin on this last question. Give you each a couple minutes to talk. What's a common myth about innovation culture that you frequently encounter, and how do you challenge it?
Hmm.
Any volunteers to go first, or should we just pick someone?
Not ready to be vulnerable, so if you could choose someone else.
I don't feel safe. Sorry.
I don't feel safe.
Jason Gaikowski, you got one for us?
I think that the big myth is that like innovation thrives in structured conditions with high degrees of governance, right? I mean, if we're honest, governance is bureaucratic overhead, right? Any incredibly well-run system would have little to no governance. In fact, the presence of governance is a reliable indicator of like, Jesus, I don't know what, right? Like it's an inefficient system. The mere presence of governance is an inefficient system. And I think that I consistently battle the myth towards injecting governance, injecting structure, and God forbid, injecting optimization or efficiency. Organizations want to do it early. You have to do it late. Roger Martin's work on this topic, I think, is highly instructive. And his work around the knowledge funnel, suggesting that all things flow from mystery to heuristic or partial knowledge to algorithm to code, is a really useful model to help battle that myth, saying, hey, we're actually working in the arenas of mystery and partial knowledge. And that means that anything that we're investing in governance and control is not being invested in exploration and learning. Structure, governance, control come late. They don't come early.
Who wants to go next?
Who's going next?
I guess I've got one or two to think about. I early in my career, I had my own startup for 5 years, and I was in my mid-20s, and we were just figuring it out, right? I didn't understand cult. We were just figuring it out, and we grew a team of like 20 kind of contractors and about 6 or 8 of us, founders and core team, small org. That was figuring it out all the time, everywhere. Legal, finance, admin, bill, the tech, delivery, contracts, everything. I didn't have another startup for another 10 years, which was in the, which would have been like around 2010. I moved over to like a real Silicon Valley startup. And what I thought of was from the movies, you know what I mean? Like we're all just going to be, in flip-flops and, eating pizza and like setting our own hours, and there's going to be alcohol in the,
Playing foosball.
Yes, playing foosball. Right, exactly. And I got, I kind of knew it wasn't going to be like nothing's like the movies, right? But the level of work, the level of intensity in terms of being able to tolerate the shifting target and like startups require a lot of now we've been at 3. It's fast pace and it's high stakes and like there is no you can hang out at a Fortune 100 or even a Fortune 500, right? You could you can get by. I was talking about my friend that was at a large manufacturer for 20 years. It's like, so I think the myth about the innovation and about myth about startups in general is that it's going to be fun, right? It's not going to be fun,
Or at least
It's
not
not
always fun.
right. Because you're Series A trying to get to B or B to C, and and now put out the unicorn math, the triple, double, double, double. It is backbreaking to triple an org twice and then double it 3 times in a row. Like it is, the conditions have to be perfect. The team has to be perfect. You have to near perfect, right? There is no perfect. But I think what I've learned at my 3rd startup here now is, and it is a blow to my ego, right? Because I've been around a long time. I've done a lot of things. I'm pretty smart. I'm really good at my job. And I've been humbled, like, oh, there's like 200 of us, like the best people I've ever worked with, and so there's a factor of humility there, and like really pulling together as a team. But anyone who's watching this who hasn't been to a startup, it's not like the movies. Like, it is a ton of work, and it's a ton of risk and potentially a ton of reward. But that I knew what I was getting into the third time now, right? Which is good. Like,
for it.
prepare yourself,
Yeah.
It's going to be 12-hour days, and it's going to be uncertainty, and yeah. So that's my short
Awesome.
thought on that.
All right, last but certainly not least, renowned Jennifer Moore and her myth about innovation.
Really struggle with these questions, I'll be honest. Like, when everyone's like, Peter Thiel, and what's the contrarian thing that you believe that no one else believes? And I'm like, I don't have any original thoughts. No one does. Like, are you kidding me? I don't believe something that no one's thought of before. Like, come on. So I struggle a little bit with like the myth part of this. I'm trying to think, what is it? But I think what I would say is I love both of what the Jason shared. And I think for me, it's this concept of what comes to mind is calculated risk, but I don't love that phrase. I'm trying to think of something better. But we watched Endgame. We rewatched Endgame for the 10th time on Sunday. And what comes to mind for me is there's that scene where the Hulk, Bruce Banner, whatever, the green guy is like, he's like, there's this timeline, and then you jump off and you have this new timeline, and he's trying to describe like how time travel works. I don't get it, whatever. And I think for me, it's a lot of times companies, depending on their size, what I've noticed in my career is it's like, okay, we're here and we need to innovate. So it's either, go faster, or we need to take on more funding, or we need to, in this timeline, what are we going to do about that? And I think often innovation has to come from jumping the timeline, so to speak, and creating a brand new branch. And that could look like in the form of the, gosh, I can't think of the word. It's the zones. It'll come to me. But anyway, it's like the moonshots thing, where you have your franchise products and then you have your moonshots, and you're kind of taking them out of some of the maybe governance and bureaucracy, like you were saying, Jason. And so I think you have to determine, based on your stage of growth and the level of risk that you're willing to take, whether you're going to innovate on this timeline or you're going to branch off and do something completely different. Some of my favorite stories, like I'm an angel investor, and so I work with a lot of Utah tech startups. And one of my favorite stories is a company that went from like 0 to 2 million really fast, and then completely blew up their product offering because they realized they didn't have a big enough market. And a lot of people would go, you have 2 million in revenue within a year. What are you doing? But they started all the way back at the beginning with a new type of customer, with a new ICP, and they built a different product, and bam, like so much more exponential growth. Even though they had already been on a really good trajectory, they chose a different timeline. So that's my myth, maybe, is we have to go on this timeline and stick with this by doing, some of those things that I mentioned, versus we got to really burn the boats. This is the moment, and we got to do something completely different. And it takes a lot of guts to do that. And yeah, that's what I would say.
I read somewhere a little while back that 82% of organizations approach innovation the same way they approach all their other normal operations. So when you hear that, it's no wonder that 70, 90, whatever percentage it is of innovations fail if you try and do it the way you've done everything else.
What got you
Jason,
here
were
won't
about to
get you
say
there.
something, or Jason Gaikowski?
I just loved what Jennifer had to say around having the courage to burn the boats.
I like that too.
Yeah.
Jennifer, if you want to bank a couple of myths that you rail against, you actually articulated two. One myth is you have to have some contrarian worldview. No, you don't. Myth number 2, you have to have some wholly original idea. No, you don't.
Right.
You absolutely do not.
Well, I do want to thank all of you for your time today. I think the discussion's been really great. We covered a variety of topics, some really great, powerful insights on the courage and innovation. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And for everyone who's listening, thank you as well. Please check out centered.work, where we will have more content like this, and the Breakthrough Innovation podcast, where this will be going live. And yeah, we'll hopefully have more of these coming up in the future. So thanks again, guys.
Thank
everybody.
you.
That was 90 minutes.